Hello, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passion Real Talk Radio, which is a subsidiary of Global Media Network LLC. And on Passion Real Talk Radio, our mantra is educate, enlighten, entertain. The views of the guest may not represent those of the host or the station. Welcome, everyone. I have with me another exceptional guest, as all my guests are exceptional, and my guest is a little more exceptional. Why? Because she's a Jersey girl, and us Jersey girls have to kick it together. So it's always an honor for me to promote one of my homestay girls, and I am happy to do so. And my guest today is Danielle Patrice, who is author and writer of Neuroscience, the Ecosystem of Domestic Violence. Danielle Patrice is a mother, domestic violence survivor, motivational speaker, and an advocate. And folks, you need to listen to Danielle Patrice's story because we can't hide domestic abuse. It happens. It could be your next door neighbor. Many children go home to domestic abuse homes, and it wasn't talked about when I was growing up. We need to talk about it. So today, I'm popping the lid open, and we're going to have this discussion. And I want to welcome Danielle Patrice to Chatting with Betsy. Welcome, Danielle.
Hi, Betsy. Thank you so much. What an introduction.
Thank you. Excuse me, folks. I have a chronic lung condition, folks. That's why you hear me cough during the show. Danielle, I am so glad that you are on today, and I'm glad that you are a strong, brave woman, because it takes a lot, folks.
Thank you.
To write a book and to go on different shows and share, a painful part of your life. And, to overcome it, and you wrote this book, and I always ask the writers and authors, what motivated you to write your book?
So my book, I started off being a survivor, like you talked about, and the motivation stems from wanting to understand what happened to me during my situation as an abused woman. I was in a marriage for 9 years, with this person, I would say roughly about 9 years. And in the midst of all of that, going through a physical, psychological, financial, just going through the whole enchilada, let's just say that. And to go from there, and also as not just a wife, but also a mother of this man's children, and to be mistreated in the sense to also being homeless and having to build myself back up again and build for my family, that I need to understand what happened, what happened for this to go, because I know I'm going through a domestic violence situation also, I know the difference in myself. And there's a saying that my mother used to say all the time, you can never go back home. And so the difference that changed, while going through this situation and rebuilding myself back up, not just, building from getting into housing, getting into stability, but also rebuilding me as a person. And so with this allowed me to go into understanding, domestic violence as a whole, and wanting to do some sort of research experiment to understand domestic violence in its entirety.
I think that it's very important for people to understand. Before I interviewed, and you were my third person I'm interviewing about domestic violence, before I read books and interviewed people about domestic violence, I would think to myself, well, why don't they just leave? Why don't they just pack up and leave? It's not that easy. It's not easy at all. Did you have to plan an escape? Because I spoke to one person. She actually had to plan her escape. Did you have to do that?
For me, it was very difficult to try to do that because, you know, the person that I was with, my ex-husband, he was very cunning. And see, that's the thing that people think that people are just physically abusive and they don't have any wits about them or intellect. And the thing is, my ex-husband was very clever in how he did things and how he went about things. So for me, the best thing that I could do was a term called gray rocking. And gray rocking is when you pretty much, it's almost like checking out, but you're not even investing in that person anymore. It's like it's almost like you're kind of ignoring them. You're not even paying them any mind. If they try to start an argument, you're pretty much, you're pretty much solid at this point. You're not giving them anything for them to harp on you about. So that's kind of what ended up happening with me. And then he ended up abandoning me and my family to be with his mistress and her children. So it kind of lucked out for me, even though it was the last incident did take place within that time frame. However, because of his abandonment, it was easier for me to not only file the restraining order, my last restraining order, but also it allowed me to file for divorce and get it done with, because at this point it was not only, even he contested it. You can't contest it at a certain point. I mean, he could, but it's like, I think with, I'm sorry, the track. After a certain point, you can't contest it if you're not filing a motion, if you're not appearing in court, and he wasn't doing that even, so I was fortunate enough to get out the way I did.
With the title of your book, The Ecosystem of Domestic Violence, do you go into why a person, male or female, is abusive? Like what kind of background they're from that might create that type of personality?
So with this book, we do that and more. So I want to be very clear. This book is really about women victims, male abusers. Not to say that there aren't men victims and women abusers and so forth, but those kind of stories, those weren't my stories to tell. So for me, this was the best story I could say from me personally going through this. So with it's so much larger than that, than what this person, kind of person that he is, what kind of abuser he is. It's in the book, but what we did is, I'll just say this, it's a research book. So it's really understanding the dynamics of victim and abuser. However, it's such an epidemic that it expands beyond just the abuser, but also into, let's say, the village of the abuser. It goes into, talks about enablers. It does talk about abusers where, is it a socioeconomic issue? Is it genetics? Is it, nature versus nurture, learned behavior, things of that sort. Also, as from different interviews, we have a lot of interviews from a lot of people from diverse backgrounds that talk about, this abusers originally are victims who have been abused and then somehow get onto the path of becoming an abuser. But then we also talk about society and what happens with the politicians creating laws, what's happening in the legal system, what's happening with, police officers, hospitals, things of that sort. So it's a roundabout information of what's happening on every level, starting with the brain to society.
Well, that sounds interesting. And I don't like to give away the whole book because I want people to pick up your book,
yes.
Danielle, and to read it. I had to ask you this in your interviews that you did, because from what I have heard from people is that the male usually, they pick their victims.
Yes.
They pick women who have low self-esteem, who maybe not have close ties to their family, and they love bomb them by, saying, oh, I love you, and showering them with gifts, and then they use that person's weaknesses against them.
Yes.
Did that happen to you?
Yeah, so just that they're pretty much, you never know, what kind of abuser you're going to get, because, this person could come in the form of a friend. This person could come in as someone that you may not know and just happen to strike up a conversation. But the thing is that it's very predatorial because they study you. Abusers study their victims. And the thing is that, the love bombing does come in because it's a whole, it's a whole terminology of just admiration being thrown at you. It's a whole lot of admiration and love and care and respect and all of these things being thrown at you initially to hook you. So and the thing is, that's what was happening to me, but also what was happening to me at that time. I was in a sense of mourning because I lost my mother. My mother committed suicide at the age of 44, and I was 22, 6 weeks after I graduated from college. So that played a role. And not to mention, there's also a study that talks about that people who are more in the depression or have certain ailments, I'll say, psychologically, what ends up happening is that they're more prone to being in a domestic violence situation. So
I
that's
could
also,
see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, here you were shocked, grieving, and there's a whole thing, folks, I'll tell you about the grieving brain that I won't go into here. But grieving affects your brain, and you can't think straight. You're in a fog. So You probably weren't even thinking clearly. Like, your emotional state was not even fully there. I mean, to be aware that this guy is an abuser, or he might not have shown that right away.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. The thing is, I remember how I felt, dealing with my mother's passing. But the thing is I think you nailed on the head. It's what they showed, because I knew my abuser from college, and I knew before we started dating, we were friends for a year and a half before that point, and not one time did he show me that aspect of abuse. What I saw as a friend, I couldn't, if anyone told me at that time, like, oh, he's this kind of person, I wouldn't have suspected. I wouldn't believe it, because he was able to charm so well. He was able to be charming. He was able to, show a different facet of himself without revealing his true, I would say this, his true identity, like some sort of superhero, but he was able to do that. And the thing is that that's what I want to say, that's what's the underlining here, is the emotion that, one, you have this person who is saying, they're loving, they're sweet, they're charming, they're all these things that you think they are, but they're not revealing that part to you. And so you won't know who they are until after you're in this relationship, and then you see the other side of this person. You see this other facet, like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type of situation. And
yes,
that's where, I say that for myself, that's what definitely was a hook, line, and sinker, trying to figure out how do I even get out of it, because even when he was courting, it was still, it was it's like a whirlwind, or were we going to get married, and getting excited about that, and wanting to have something, this newfound family, because I had lost mine. So that's part of, seeing what I saw, what I experienced.
You brought out a great point, Danielle, and I want to talk about that. The abuser is very charming, very cunning, and they put a different face on in public. And that's why when people find out, oh, they did that, oh, I don't believe her. He's so charming, so sweet. Oh, she's making that up. No, folks, I'm telling you, people show two different sides, one to their family behind closed doors and one to the public. And your predators, your child predators, do the same thing. They do the same exact thing. They show two different sides, one behind closed doors and one to the community. I heard a story, a pastor's wife. He was a wife beater. You would never know it by looking at him. He was pastor of the church. You would never think it, right? You would never think that. So I just want to tell the audience, we don't know. You don't, I don't. We don't know what goes behind closed doors. These people are very calculating even. They're just,
absolutely.
They know. We have seen this from hearing about, my mind just went blank, sex trafficking, human sex traffickers, how they lure their victims. And it's like, they put on the charm, and then they use the weakness against that young girl or a young woman. And this is why I have to say this, and you could tell me, Daniel, if you have this in your life. And I just want to tell, parents, guardians, be so careful how you talk to your children. Because when you put them down and they have low self-esteem, they're going to be a victim. They are very well can be a victim because they have such low self-esteem that when someone pays them attention, they're like, oh, they're paying attention to me. I better, put up with what they give me because I don't deserve any better. This is very common from what I have heard. Was that your experience, Danielle? Did you have low self-esteem? Have you interviewed people who've had low self-esteem and met up with an abuser?
Not for me, because I also say from my personal experience. When I was in my situation, before my mother passed forward, I was especially independent and ready to take on the world. And I was ready to graduate from college, had my whole plan, my life planned out for me, and was ready to move on beyond that chapter. What changed was my mother's passing. What changed also was a lot of different variables that took place dealing with family issues. And part of that was, after my mother's passing, it came into some money, and they wanted money from the, from the funeral. They wanted some of that money. Oh, well, you have to pay me back for her funeral. A couple months after her funeral, I'm dealing with my father saying that you need to move on. You need to get over it, move on. Mm-hmm. And I was raised by a single parent. I wasn't raised by my father. So having those type of incidents with family, now that part I will say it did push me into more of wanting this family, because when my family, one of my relatives had explained, oh, well, you don't get my blessing for marrying her because she has business to handle, and what they meant was she needs to pay money back for the funeral. And so that moment, I saw him protect me in a way that my mother would have protected me. So it wasn't necessarily low self-esteem, but family members can put you in that situation because you're not putting on a strong front saying, no, we don't allow outsiders or anyone to disrespect our family members, because the same family member destroyed my character to this person. I don't give you my blessing because she is this kind of way, she's this person, and she's this and this. And again, you're talking about somebody's fiance, and you don't really know this person that way. So in turn, what she did was allowed my ex-husband, my abuser, to say basically, we don't protect her. So whatever you do, that's on you. She may not have said that, outright, but that's also, that's read between the lines. What are you telling this person? So, yeah, I would say, yes, be careful how you talk to your relatives. Be careful how you talk to your children. But I would also say, also let them know the dangers of what's out here, because there could be a child who is of loving parents, who has loving parents, and still get in a domestic violence situation because they're not aware. So I think that the majority of it is about understanding domestic violence in its entirety and knowing what to look for. Because those same abusers that may challenge your parents, you think that's sweet and it's cool, are those ones that are willing to challenge you in a way that you weren't ready for. So, and I just want to say this want to say this real quick, that the best way that, and I've been saying this different shows, that like today, for example, is Valentine's Day, and so imagine you're getting all this room full of roses and teddy bears and balloons, and you're saying, hey, this person, we're giving you a steak, you're going to a steakhouse, and you're having all of this for you. You're going to be treated special, the whole nine. Now, you're going to the steakhouse, all right, and on the menu it says this is steak, you're getting a T-bone steak, and you're expecting this nice, juicy steak, and you tell the waiter you want a steak, okay, and everything, all right, you got your eyes on this steak. And then when they come back, they're bringing kitty litter from the garbage sprinkled on your T-bone steak. Well, that's a steak, isn't it? No, that's not what I ordered. I don't know, what is this? What is this? And then they take, I didn't want this. Then they bring you another steak, and it's half-eaten steak, but it still looks juicy. Well, don't you want that? So that's the kind of games that they're playing. And then they bring, let's say you take that back, and then they bring out a smaller steak, a steak so small that after the fourth, fifth time of having to ask this waiter to bring it back, bring something that you're finally satisfied, to have some small little steak because at least I'll have something. And that's what domestic violence does. You have this love for this person. This person is destroying you with your own love for them. And they're turning your love into something they can control, manipulate, exploit, and discard while breaking you down in the process. That is domestic violence.
Well, that is great knowledge to have, Danielle. And, just hearing it from someone who has experienced it, folks, take note because it could happen to anyone. And this is why we discuss this. It needs to be discussed. I can't even imagine, being in an abusive marriage like that and having to rebuild. I know from my own personal experience, being from emotionally abusive home environment, how I still, at the age of 66, have to flip my beliefs every day about myself, not believe a story someone else told me, but I can't even imagine what it would be like to build yourself up, to trust people after you've been in an abusive marriage and you loved and trusted this person so much, and then they hurt you like no one else ever did. I think I would be afraid to love again. I think I'd be afraid to date again.
Absolutely. And I'll say I've been out of my abusive situation, it's been 6 years. It'll be 6 years, especially in May. But, my thing is that it's to build it is frustrating, it's aggravating, it's upsetting. It's all the things that you can imagine what you would feel having to rebuild and having to rebuild with children. Because when he planned to leave, he left not paying bills. He left not paying rent for months, not helping, making sure the car was fixed, to make sure that I was destitute and that my children were destitute. And we ended up being homeless, living at the bottom of a barbershop for a little bit, living in different hotels from different points. This is my son's father, my children's father. You understand what I'm saying? So this is the aggravation, the betrayal, the feelings of betrayal that you would do that to another human being, let alone basically your family, to be with somebody else and their children. To me, when I think about it even now, it's still disgusting. But to rebuild, I have to rebuild because I have to rebuild for myself and I have to rebuild for my children. Because I would say this, the last incident, my son, I felt my youngest, who was 4 at the time, I felt he saved my life and helped protected me. And, and I felt like if I couldn't get out of this situation for myself, I was going to make sure I was going to get out of it for my children and make sure that I could be their protector and make sure I did what I had to do to protect them and be there for them. And, and so it was, I'll say this, it went from wanting to have this marriage, wanting to have this, this traditional marriage and loving my husband and wanting to be there and keep my marriage, but I paid a very high and hefty price for that. And because of that, it had to turn into self-preservation. and that means taking care of me and my children and being there for us and trying to rebuild everything. And it's not easy. And, for that, wanting to date, I'll say this, I am, I've been dating in years, and I'm not interested, because I want to further my research. But, two, I'm focused on healing for me and my family, finding peace within myself and finding peace for my children. I'm not, love will find me when it's time. But my thing is that I rather focus on healing my family, because at the end of the day, it wasn't just my husband. This was my children's father. My children also grieved that. So
yes, and you bring up, very painful. And that's, I can only imagine how hurtful it is to just your whole being. And then you put out point, the children. A lot of people stay in the marriages because they're children, and folks, your children see what's going on. They hear what's going on. And it's not setting a good example, because usually when a father is violent or a mother and abusive, it's transgenerational. It just carries on. And your children, are they in therapy? Because they went through a terrible ordeal to see their dad hurting you.
Well, my younger one doesn't have the memories. He's a lot older now. But my older one, I had him in counseling. I had him in, with different mentors, because he does have the memories. It did upset him. The things that he remembers. And so my thing is that that's where I feel there's got to be a lot of resources in place for children, in addition to victims. More so than ever, because, like you said, it's intergenerational. So, my concern now as their mother, is not only making sure that, one, they're not abusive, that they're not, they're following in their father's footsteps, but also making sure they're not abused. So putting all of that into perspective and making sure that, I know I'm not a man. I can't teach them how to be a man, but I tell them I can teach you how to be an adult. And I could, and being human, and being, what do you want to be in life? Not what is expected of you because you're going to be a man one day, but what does that mean for you? What do you want to be? And who do you want? What type of person you want to be? So I think that's where just the start of it is getting to understand themselves, and understanding also that it's okay to love, to miss, to be angry, to pray for their father, all of those things. They have every right to do it. It's their father. He's their father. And that to have a space open for them to do so.
Yes. And it's really great that you had that communication with your sons, that they can tell you how they feel. And, I had that with my son. I mean, I'm not when my husband was alive, he was, working a lot. So I was with Josh all the time, and just want to teach Josh to be a compassionate human being. He had the male figure, but unfortunately his dad was a male chauvinist. So he said some things to Josh that were not proper, like, cooking is woman's work, cleaning is woman's work. And I have to say, no, Josh, that's for men too. But, I say this a lot on my show, Danielle, and I'm going to say it again. We need, as parents, guardians, to keep lines of communication open with our children, because if we cut them off, they're going to go to people who don't have the best knowledge and advice. And they will get themselves into the wrong crowd. We need to let our children come to us to discuss how they feel, especially going through a traumatic event. Your son saw what was going on that traumatized him. And I don't know why, Danielle, people think, especially when I was growing up, but people think children don't have problems. Children aren't depressed. Now it's coming out that children are depressed, and they do have emotional problems. And please, folks, if I'm going to go on a little tangent here, if your child ever says to you, I'm depressed, please don't tell them to snap out of it, get over it, take them for help immediately. They're crying out for help. Help them. Don't shrug it off and put your head in the sand. And I'm also a mental health advocate, and children are struggling, and they're struggling today, and we need to help them. Excuse me. Danielle, I'd like to know how long did it take you to write your book?
Believe it or not, it took 1.5 years.
That's not bad.
Exactly. It wasn't too bad. For me, I started this, I want to say, was it July or August of 2022. And it, was self-published by October 2023. So not too bad.
And what would you like people, the readers, to take away from your book?
I would love the readers to understand the whole side of the whole facet of domestic violence in its entirety. That it's not just a one-size-fits-all. It's not a custom, it means it's not just a, hey, just go ahead and get a restraining order type of ordeal, although they do come in handy to protect, but it's not the end-all, be-all. That there are things in place, especially in society, historically, and there's a lot of things that play a role into how abusers are able to get away with it, how victims are constantly re-victimized, how mental health professionals, definitely have to take a precedent, and not targeting them, but, mental health definitely needs to take more of an active role. We're now starting to talk about some of these things. Things are starting to become more prevalent in our daily lives. We hear about it more often, but also it needs to come into play even within the legal system, because that's where a lot of the problems, a lot of the, these laws that we have, they're not where they need to be to fully secure and create the safety, not only of victims, but also victim defendants. And that's something which is someone who pretty much fights back and ends up getting charged for the crime of domestic violence and ends up getting lumped in with abusers. So there's been a lot of work done to help domestic violence victims, but there's so much more that needs to be done to help and to make sure that domestic violence can be eradicated. So I think that this book, it gives you a nice understanding on all levels of what's happening in today's society through many eyes, through my eyes, through a lot of the interviewees' eyes, and through different statistics and scientific literature reviews.
Well, I'm glad you wrote this book, Danielle. And I've heard from other people, restraining orders, and I write in the paper, restraining orders. Unfortunately, people still get killed. Right. Who have had restraining orders. These abusers are put in jail. They're let out, or sometimes the girlfriend or the wife doesn't press charges because they're afraid. And it's really the legal system needs to step up. People need to stop protecting the abusers. Yes. I've heard in the military. I've heard if they're like policemen, they cover it up. It should not be covered up. I don't care what job you have. If you are an abuser, then you need to be put in jail just like everyone else if you hurt somebody. And there was, I think it was South Jersey, and I forgot how long ago, the New Jersey police officer killed his wife. Oh, wow. And they knew, that everyone knew that he, restraining order, that he was abusive.
How long ago?
And, it had to be within the past 5 years.
Oh, wow.
I think it was South Jersey.
Okay.
I don't remember what town, but there was an incident in North Jersey, and I forgot how long ago it was. The wife, I think it was a wife or girlfriend, she was killed in a public place at a restraining order. The legal system, mental health care, need to do more to protect the children, the wife, the partner, for sure, because we shouldn't allow this to happen in our society. And I know that years ago, that when women were abused, it was part of the package, Danielle. It was like, they were considered their husband's property way, way, way back. And there was a lot of violence going on, but that was like, I hate to say it, the norm. Like people thought that was normal. Right. And it's not. And women didn't fight back then because basically they had no rights and nobody would believe them. And that's another problem. Women still aren't being believed because their abuser puts on one face to the public. It's not something people make up, folks. And especially if you have the scars physically, but there are scars mentally that are not seen that people have because of being abused. And that is unfortunate, and we need to help them. Excuse me. Danielle, where can people buy your book?
So right now it's on Amazon and it's on barnesandnobles.com. It's online, not in the store yet, but you can get it from those places. And I hope that, and if you are interested, you can always look at the sample. I believe they cover up to the first chapter. You'll see a little snippet of it, and hope you are able to fully understand domestic violence once you read this book.
And how can people connect with you, Danielle? If
so
you want
Sure. I'm on Instagram, Speak Danielle Patrice. I'm also on Twitter. I have a different handle, which is X now, formerly Twitter. It's author D Patrice. So you can contact me there or X, whichever one.
That's great. Do you have an author page on Facebook?
I don't have an author page. Not on Facebook. I'm still trying to build my social platforms right now. But I have a link tree in case anyone's interested. You could hear other podcasts I have so far and the links to the book.
Oh, okay. That's great. I can't thank you enough for coming on, writing your book. Folks, the name of the book is Neuroscience, the Ecosystem of Domestic Violence. Let's Open Our Eyes by Danielle Patrice. Let's open our eyes, read the book, and if you know of anyone who is a victim going through this, buy them the book as a gift. And do you have any recommendations of where women can go, Danielle?
I would say any local organizations that you may have in your county, in your state, I would start there. There's other organizations that are out there that are willing to help as well. And, I'll just say this, like for me, some of the agencies in the state weren't able to help me in certain capacities, and I was able to reach out to other that are lesser known. So I would say start if you can, or maybe go to a place that you can search domestic violence shelters, or domestic violence resources. I believe there's the hotline, domestic violence hotline. I believe it's 1-800-799-SAFE. I would definitely start there and see what you can do to at least get the ball rolling to get yourself to safety.
Well, I want to thank you, Danielle Patrice, for coming on, sharing your story to help other people. And I wish you the best of luck. I hope your book becomes that international bestseller. People need to pick it up. It's a global problem, folks. It's not just here in New Jersey. It's all over the world. And we need to be aware of it. And please teach your children that they should be treated with respect and dignity. And, you know, I'm not talking about fake positivity, folks. Your child does something that's not right, yes, correct them, but please don't put them down. Please don't tell your daughters or your sons they're ugly, they're no good. That's not good. That's not a good foundation. You want to create confidence in your children. You want to help your children to feel they have a right to be respected and to respect others. And this is, like, to me, the foundation. Because I think if a lot of young girls were treated properly, maybe they wouldn't fall victim to their abusers, and including boys also. So that's what I have to say. I want to thank everyone for listening. Please read the blog. It will have information about Danielle Patrice and how you can contact Danielle and where you can buy her book. Jeannie White, the station manager, writes the blog, produces the show. Thank you, Jeannie, and thank you to Lillian Cauldwell, CEO of Passionate World Talk Radio, that makes this all possible. And thank you for listening, subscribing, sharing the show. If you don't already subscribe to Chatting with Betsy, please do so. It is for free on Spotify, Spreaker, Apple, Amazon Music. And share the show because I want to help people, and that's why I'm here. And, you know, when people listen to Danielle, they'll say, oh, I'm a victim too. I can't. If she's doing, you know, well and she came this far, I can too. And that's what I'm here for. I'm here to encourage everyone. I'm here to tell you all you're not alone. And we all think we're alone, but we're not. We're just afraid to say how we feel because we're afraid of being judged. And I give Danielle Patrice and other women who have been abused, who are domestic violence survivors, kudos for coming out, sharing this story, because that is not an easy task to do. It takes someone who is brave and strong to do that. So kudos to you, Danielle Patrice, and to all the women out there and men who come forward and say, I was a domestic abuse survivor. I am one, and you can make it also. That's what people need to hear, that they can do it too. And that's what I have to say today, folks. And as I always say at the end of my show, in a world where you could be anything, please be kind, shine your light bright, because we all need to do that now more than ever. And if you want to follow me, I'm on Facebook, Betsy E. Wurzel, Wurzel, and I have a Facebook for caregivers. And even if you're not a caregiver, #Kick Alzheimer's Ass Movement. Everyone's welcome to join. And that's what I have to say today, folks. Thank you all again. This is Betsy Wurzel. You're a host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio, which is a subsidiary of Global Media Network LLC. Chat with you soon. Bye-bye now.